I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Mark Miller.
There's so many brands who say the right words. They write manifestos, they have slogans, they have t-shirts, they have taglines, and yet in good times it's easy to stand by them, but in bad times they quickly exhibit a fundamentally different behavior. Meanwhile, the ones who are building these sort of forward-looking, enduring legacies are the ones who behave their beliefs always in good times or bad.
Mark Miller is the co-author of Legacy in the Making, building a long-term brand to stand out in a short-term world. He is the founder of the Legacy Lab, a thought leadership and consulting practice that explores how brands can build modern legacies. He is also Chief Strategy Officer at Team One, Publicis Groupe's global luxury and premium brand agency. Mark is a sought-after presenter, keynote speaker, and panelist on global luxury and premium brands, leadership and culture, legacy making, and his recent book. My interview with Mark Miller is coming right up, but first.
Support for this and all the other podcasts on the Marketing Podcast Network is provided by Momento. Yes, you can use AI to make your job as a marketer easier. Momento is built to put the power of AI in your hands. It can write social media captions, have it watch or listen to a podcast and suggest, then automatically create social media posts to promote the show. Heck, it can even listen to a podcast episode, then write a poem about it you can use on your company blog. Go check it out. MPN listeners can try it for free at bit.ly/MomentoMPN. That's bit.ly/MomentoMPN. Hey, creators, podcasters, and brands, if you work on Instagram at all, you have to be tired of the limitations of link in bio. Well, there's a solution. Stampede.social is the ultimate Instagram tool that will change the way you engage with customers, fans, and followers. With Stampede.social, you go beyond a single bio link and instead slide into your fans' DMs. Fire off an automated direct link to wherever you want to send them straight from your posts and lives. This link is only sent to the fans who ask for it, so you'll know exactly who loves your content the most. And Stampede.social does so much more. It gives you back the power of knowing who is engaging with you. It makes it easy to engage with them using AI, and using Stampede.social gives you insights about how your Instagram profile is performing with super robust reports. Drive more clicks, more sales, more followers, and have more time to do what you really love, creating that amazing content. Join the ranks of the world's savviest Instagram creators who already trust Stampede.social. It's a true game changer and will transform the way you connect and engage with your Instagram fans forever. Just for you creators, use our limited time exclusive promo code MPN50. That's MPN50 and get 50% off any monthly or annual subscription tier at checkout. Are you ready to create a stampede of fans back to your content? Don't miss out on this special deal. Head over to Stampede.social.
Mark Miller, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be a part of this.
In talking about legacy, that there's two big L words. Luxury is certainly its own thing, but really define what it means to be a brand with a legacy.
Oh, this topic is so important to me, and I'm so passionate about it. And so, of course, the challenge is to say as distinctly and clearly as possible. I think the challenge of a topic like this is when we say the word legacy, instantly what people think about are brands that are many years old, sometimes 100 years old.
Right.
The belief is that we're talking about things that are of the past, not of the present and not of the future. And a lot of my work is focused on the notion of how do we build brands that we don't just have a reverence for because of their history, but brands that we have a reverence for in perpetuity, more of a forward-looking concept than a backward-looking concept.
That's interesting because, my default would have been, okay, so something like, Coca-Cola aged. But is there an example of one that you can think of that meets that kind of expanded definition of with kind of almost like legacy meaning?
A wonderful question, and I have a book filled with examples, so I'm going to try to get down to, I'm actually going to give you two because in a sense, it does apply to brands that are older, but not just because they're older.
Right.
It's more that they continue to work on this every day. I'll give you an example, but equally, You could be a younger brand with that same predisposition. It's more of an ideology and a way of moving through the world than it is simply about the number of years you've been around so far. And so I'll give you two examples. On the one end of things, we have a brand like the Wimbledon tennis tournament, been around for a long time, very storied tournament. And I think there are plenty of people who would look at Wimbledon and say, well, that's an example of a brand that's stuck in the past because they have traditions that seem to be fixed. Players tend to wear all white uniforms, and people say that's not in step with the world that we live in. But the brand has a really clear point of view on what they're trying to achieve. They want to put the world's very best tennis on display in perpetuity. And their perspective is the best tennis is not personified by the clothes you wear, but by your skill and ability. So in the world of Wimbledon, they have all the players dress equally, and then they distinguish themselves by their style of play. And so some people say, well, that's interesting because I look at the courts and they put such modern technology, roofs that open and close, explain that. And their answer is the same. They're there to put the world's best tennis on display. The fact that in the beginning they didn't have the technology to open and close a roof shouldn't prevent them from evolving, because if it rains and they don't have a roof like that, they have to stop play. So I think it's a lovely example of a brand that says they're very clear on what they're trying to achieve over a long time, but they're willing and in fact embracing of adaptation given the world that we live in. So I think that's a lovely example of an older brand that's living this sort of ideology or philosophy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's a brand called Me and the Bees Lemonade. It was started by a 4.5-year-old founder in Austin, Texas, in 2009. So a young entrepreneur. Brand hasn't been around for as long. She was stung by 2 bees in the same week. The parents told her to learn what bees could do for her in the world. And what she learned is bees pollinate. For that reason, she gets to enjoy her favorite food. And so she created a lemonade brand sweetened with honey from bees. She got a $60,000 investment from Damon John on Shark Tank. She got distribution in Whole Foods. She was invited to the White House. She was sued by a farmer in California for trademark infringement. He said, you're a cute kid. It was a fun story when you were selling lemonade in your lawn in Austin, Texas, but now your brand is everywhere and mine isn't. And in the court of law, the farmer was right. But she did what Wimbledon did, which she was very clear in what she was trying to achieve, create a brand that would help the bees in perpetuity. And the way she evolved the brand wasn't to change what she was all about. She simply said, I have a story to tell bigger than a product to sell, so I'm going to name my product that way. She named it Me and the Bees. And she gets up on stage and she writes books and she makes presentations around the world to say, let me tell you the story of me and the bees. And in perpetuity, she has a brand built around galvanizing groups of people to help save the honeybees.
You know, I'm not sure it's something that you'd recommend, but I feel like if someone can take you to court, can sue you, you've perhaps built something that might be a potential legacy as well. But that's probably not the way that we want to aim for there. But in thinking about that, your work, both as founder of Legacy Lab and your book, Legacy in the Making, the how of legacy work. I mean, we've been talking about kind of the what of legacy work, which is its own to define. But when it comes to the how, that it can be, I would imagine, a real challenge. So, what does the how of legacy work look like?
This was really core to the study because, as you say, it's really, I don't know if I'd say easy, but it's sort of superficial to stop at the question and say, can we look at legacy through a modern lens? You know, that sounds fantastic. But of course, is there a way to do it? What can be discerned and learned from the ones who are succeeding at doing it? And we learned 5 things that I feel approximate your question of the how. The first is the ones who are succeeding at doing it are people and leaders specifically who take leadership personally. I think we're all very familiar with the phrase that there's your personal life and your professional life, and perhaps those two things should not mix. And yet for leaders of organizations and brands like these, they often start their business as a way to solve a personal problem or make a long-term contribution. They do wind up making a lot of money, but they don't start out with how do they make their $1 billion. They start out with how do they make their contribution. So the first part of the how is they take leadership personally. The second part is there's so many brands who say the right words. They write manifestos, they have slogans, they have T-shirts, they have taglines, and yet in good times it's easy to stand by them, but in bad times they quickly exhibit a fundamentally different behavior. Meanwhile, the ones who are building these sort of forward-looking, enduring legacies are the ones who behave their beliefs always in good times or bad. The third part is instead of saying we are the makers and they are the buyers, they are consumers who have targets on their back. They're brands who look even at outsiders as though they are insiders, co-creators, co-authors, co-owners. Fourth, they're people who don't just, and brands that don't just aim to be the best at what they do, but to be the only ones who do it, to be a category of one or to invent their own game. And finally, instead of just doing something at one point in time and telling that same story over and over again for many years, there are people, brands, and organizations who never stop making legacy. So as we said with Wimbledon, they do put the retractable roof over the court. That's the way they evolve their story. And the young lady with her lemonade, she wasn't stopped at the name went away. She found a way to evolve how the world saw her brand without ever having to sacrifice what she fundamentally believed.
It's real interesting because I love those two examples too, because they are really it doesn't get probably much more diverse in examples than that of something as big and storied and historic as Wimbledon and a kid with an interesting lemonade stand. And in thinking about that, I always, we've spent 400 and some episodes here on the challenge of talking about what brands are and why they endure. But it's almost like you said, with both of those examples, that there's something bigger behind them, that even in the face of challenges, because in the case of Wimbledon, like you talked about, time and keeping up with the times could be seen as a challenge. The external pressures on me and the bees, challenging that and really finding the something bigger behind that. And I think that that's something that can be elusive. So what is there like an idea starter for thinking about what's the something bigger behind this that can help us navigate these challenges?
I love the question. It's one of the pieces that I asked myself and my co-author, Lucas Conley, did as we were doing our work. And one of the philosophies introduced to us along the way, it's not our original thinking, but it was thinking that was shared with us and we reflect upon in our book. And there have been whole books written about it. And that's the philosophy or ideology around something called ikigai. And ikigai effectively suggests that if you ask yourself 4 questions, you will get closer and closer to figuring out either your personal reason for being and, or in the case of business, your business's reason for being. It's not the only way to get there, but I think it's one really good, practical, common sense way of just getting started. And the questions just kind of go like this. The first is, are you working on something that you love? And the principle is because when times go to bad, and they will, if you're working on something you love, you're more likely to roll up your sleeves and stick to it and find a way through it. You'll persevere. So you're working on something you love. The second is, are you working on something that you're good at? And I think that's also critically important because, as I'm a father of a 10-year-old daughter, and at a point in life, my wife and I, like many parents, probably said to our child, just focus on doing things that you love. But as we turn from being a child to being an adult and thinking about the money that helps us to grow lives and sustain lives, if you love something you're not good at it, chances are you're not going to make money at it. You're not going to succeed at it. And so I think that's really important. There are plenty of people who'd say, I love to be a filmmaker, but maybe their talent isn't as a director. Maybe their talent is as a writer. Maybe their talent is as a producer. Maybe they can do something adjacent to the film world. But those are the first 2 points. Something you love, something you're good at. The next is something that you can be paid for. And I guess that's as true for not for profit as it is for a profit, which is if you love it, you're good at it, and people are willing to give you money for it. For profit or not, you should be able to sustain what you're working on. And without people being able to pay for it, you're less likely to be able to sustain it. And then the fourth and most important piece for me is, are you doing something, working on something that the world needs more of? And the reason that matters is because when things become commonplace, certainly in the world of branding, things become substitutable, switchable, and replaceable. Things become worth less, not worth more. And so if you can find an area to focus on that the world needs more of, that you offer an abundant supply that is otherwise in rare supply, that at the intersection of sort of those questions, something you love, something you're good at, something you can earn an income at, and something the world needs more of, you're more likely to find something worth pursuing over the long term.
On Brand will be right back after this.
As a person with a very deep voice, I'm hired all the time for advertising campaigns. But a deep voice doesn't sell B2B, and advertising on the wrong platform doesn't sell B2B either. That's why if you're a B2B marketer, you should use LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn has the targeting capabilities to help you reach the world's largest professional audience. That's right, over 70 million decision makers all in one place. All the big wigs, then medium wigs, also small wigs who are on the path to becoming big wigs. Okay, that's enough about wigs. LinkedIn ads allows you to focus on getting your B2B message to the right people. So, does that mean you should use ads on LinkedIn instead of hiring me, the man with the deepest voice in the world? Yes. Yes, it does. Get started today and see why LinkedIn is the place to be to be. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, creators, podcasters, and brands, if you work on Instagram at all, you have to be tired of the limitations of link in bio. Well, there's a solution. Stampede.social is the ultimate Instagram tool that will change the way you engage with customers, fans, and followers. With Stampede.social, you go beyond a single bio link and instead slide into your fans' DMs. Fire off an automated direct link to wherever you want to send them straight from your posts and lives. This link is only sent to the fans who ask for it, so you'll know exactly who loves your content the most. And Stampede.social does so much more. It gives you back the power of knowing who is engaging with you. It makes it easy to engage with them using AI, and using Stampede.social gives you insights about how your Instagram profile is performing with super robust reports. Drive more clicks, more sales, more followers, and have more time to do what you really love, creating that amazing content. Join the ranks of the world's savviest Instagram creators who already trust Stampede.social. It's a true game changer and will transform the way you connect and engage with your Instagram fans forever. Just for you creators, use our limited time exclusive promo code MPN50. That's MPN50 and get 50% off any monthly or annual subscription tier at checkout. Are you ready to create a stampede of fans back to your content? Don't miss out on this special deal. Head over to Stampede.social.
Now, back to the show. I want to switch gears a bit and talk about your work at Team One, talking about luxury brands. And that's, a unique segment. And it over the years, talk about time changing things. There was a time when luxury branding was kind of an elevated pinnacle, and then there were a few years where it's a little awkward to be a luxury brand, and now we see sort of like on the fashion front we see like quiet luxury. How does one go about being in the luxury space today?
It's really interesting. We hear a lot of conversation, as you can imagine, in the context of a post-COVID world, where so many of us had to deal with realities that were about the basics. Sustaining life, it wasn't so much about the luxuries that we could afford or not afford. It was about making it through and surviving. And in that context, basic needs would seem to far outweigh the necessity or the desire to spend on things that are, quote unquote, luxurious. And yet, I think one of the things that many of us observed through COVID is that even though we were asked to scale back in a number of ways because other things mattered more, it's also very natural for humans to not want to scale back on our dreams. That if we have to scale back on the things that we dream about, life doesn't become as joyful, as wonderful as it could otherwise be. Now, there's a difference between our ability to dream sometimes and the means we have to achieve those dreams. But core to the notion of luxury is the idea of something to dream about. And I don't think that is diminished in many ways. An appetite for that has really grown through this period. And so for a truly luxurious brand to thrive and succeed in this environment where people are still prepared to dream, but question what they will pay money for, comes this notion of differentiation. That fundamentally, if you're substitutable, easily substitutable and replaceable, I will pay the least for those things. But if you're not easily substitutable and replaceable, because nothing can take the place of a brand or brands like those, then you become worth paying more for over time. And so that is really at the heart of the challenge for a lot of luxury brands today, which is what is their point of differentiation, not just from a functional point of view, but what are those incomparable qualities they have? So you can't line one hotel up against another, one automotive company against another. And so you both satisfy people's desire for dreaming and you fulfill them by offering them something unique or rare in a world where there's things that are far too common.
I have what is admittedly a weird question, but what if a brand is early stage thinking about this and has the question, am I, are we, is that what this is, does that ever come up of just kind of the luxury brand sentience of knowing whether or not that's what you are?
I think there are plenty of brands who were already in the luxury space who are facing a moment of crisis, which is they were once luxurious and therefore worth price premiums. And do they persist that way today and do they continue to be worth price premiums? For certain, that's true. Separately, there are a number of brands that are starting out that either take a strong point of view that they want to position against that. They want to be a so-called new luxury brand. They want to compete on other qualities. They either reject where luxury came from or what it was about, or they want to redefine it, reclass it, and recategorize it. Generally speaking, luxurious brands are able to command price premiums, and they do it on the basis of things that aren't easy to compare. And so if there are brands that want to be low volume, high desire, premium price, then it's incumbent upon them to find those qualities. And if there are brands that want to reject it, there are plenty of brands who succeed on the basis of being more democratic. The challenge, of course, is when you become so democratic to the point that everyone has it, or so democratic to the point that there are many things like it, then those brands risk becoming substitutable and replaceable over time.
Yeah, that seems like a tricky bit of real estate to occupy, but it almost makes me wonder. I feel like, no, I can't get any examples to come to mind, but it seems like, is there a space for something that commands that premium price but does not brand itself with the traditional trappings of luxury?
I take a particular point of view on this, and I know it's not a view that's shared by everyone, and this is my view of it. I'll say that this is my view of it. And my view of it is sometimes we're apt to say, well, there's old luxury and there's new luxury, and we'll point to things like generational differences. We value different things. Younger generation cares about values and purpose, maybe more than an older generation that cares about things and objects and so on. But nonetheless, there's certain principles of what defines a luxury. So, for example, if there isn't any clear point of distinction, then that's not old luxury or new luxury. That's something other than the category altogether. So I think if we were to say that new luxury is defined by access for everyone, where access for everyone gets you to are prices that aren't premium prices. And I'm not passing judgment. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'll give you a really great example that comes from the legacy research and try to connect it to luxury. One of the brands that I have a real passion for and write about, and research and write about, is Patagonia. And I can't honestly tell you that if you sat down with Yvon Chouinard and said to him, so Patagonia is a luxury brand, that he would look at you and say, you're exactly right. In fact, I don't think he would use that language at all.
Right.
He wasn't setting out to be a businessman, wasn't setting out to charge premium prices. He had a really specific problem he wanted to solve in the world. He was someone who climbed rocks, mountains, and he noticed that others who were climbing like him were causing harm to the environment. So he wanted to create equipment where one person could climb it in such a manner that the people who came up behind him or her could enjoy it in exactly the same way. A bit of language that he uses that stays with me is this notion of he wants to move through the world without leaving a trace. And so in solving that problem, Patagonia was his business solution. Now, there are plenty of people who would tell you, but Patagonia isn't entirely accessible. It's not priced where it's affordable for everyone. And there's a reason for that, because to achieve what Yvon is working on requires money and R&D. He had created things that were not commonly available, sourcing solutions, manufacturing solutions, production solutions that comes at a cost. And so you wouldn't call that uppercase luxury, and he probably wouldn't call it luxury at all. But nonetheless, for Patagonia owners, fans, advocates, that brand is not substitutable and switchable.
Right.
And it's worth paying whatever price they put on it. So it has qualities in common with brands that are luxurious, whether we call it a luxury or not. And I think that's one of the reasons that Patagonia has sustained, that the brand has a mission that it's pursuing bigger than just making things, that it's steadfast in what it's doing, that it's created products that are clearly differentiated consumers. Even if you could point to things that look familiar in other brands, there's simply an emotional attachment to it that can't be substituted or replaced by any other brand. And therefore, the money that they're putting into R&D and production and sourcing and so on, that's money that to a degree can be recouped by people who have the desire to pay for it, the dreams to do it, and also the means to act on that.
You know, about 5 minutes ago when I was struggling I feel like there's an example of this, Patagonia. That's perfect because, like you said, it checks a lot of those boxes, but I doubt that is how they see themselves. But it's almost makes me think of your work too, because luxury, legacy, both L words that end with Y. But it's almost like how do you see it? I see like a Venn diagram there, and maybe it's not even that much of a Venn diagram. Maybe there's a lot of overlap in the traits of legacy and luxury. You spend a lot of time using both words. How do you see the interrelationship between them?
It's another excellent question. I came into these topics through slightly different doorways, but they clearly and easily converge for me because I feel that one of the defining aspects of truly luxurious brands, products, experiences are that they endure over time and they're not substitutable and not switchable. They're not easily disposable. And so my passion and interest in finding brands that can build these long-lasting stories for me is where luxury and legacy in the making intersect. It's about finding these things that have value greater than the prices we put on them because they fulfill and play roles that endure over time, not just physically, but emotionally for people. And that's where these two topics nicely come together, I think.
Wow, that was a big question and a solid answer. But again, as someone that spends time with both, I'm sure it's not the first time you've thought of it. Mark, it is now time for me to ask you a much easier question, and that is for a brand that has made you smile recently.
I grew up in Toronto, Canada. I grew up in a family that loves music. I would say of all kinds, but certainly of many kinds. And so like a lot of kids who had the opportunity to do it, I learned how to play an instrument. So music's always been important for me. And a brand that I came to love is a brand called the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville. It's the most amazing musical experience in the world. It's a place for songwriters. It didn't start out that way, but it is now. They started out as a restaurant and a bar, and some songwriters had asked the founders, could they play some music? And they set up in the middle of the room and they told stories. And what they noticed was an audience gathered around them. A restaurant and a bar are substitutable and replaceable, but a religious experience of sorts, a spiritual experience, where songwriters gather and tell stories, people were still drinking and eating. but enjoying music in a way they hadn't before. And the songwriters love it as well. If you know anything about the Bluebird, the perception of it is significant. It was on a popular TV show that was also called Nashville in the recent past. Artists like Taylor Swift perceptually got their start there. An artist like Garth Brooks definitely got his start there. It feels like it would be huge. It's a place that seats 100 people. And in a world where strip malls are being taken away, where small venues are being displaced by big ones, the experience of this place is huge, even though the practicality of it is much smaller square footage. And that is a brand that, despite the pressures for evolution and change because the world demands it, has found a way to sustain that over time.
Well, that is a great smile and a great legacy of a brand as well. Mark, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
3 places. You can find me on X, or if you used to call it Twitter, at Mark Miller LA, short for Los Angeles. You can find me on LinkedIn as Mark Miller, though you will find a lot of them. I'm the Mark Miller who's the Chief Strategy Officer at Team One. And I'm quite proud of the fact that we just collaborated with Fast Company to launch a docuseries based on the book. So if you like the story about Me and the Bees and you like the story about Bluebird Cafe, we've made documentary films that help to bring these to life. So if you go look on Fast Company and you look for Mark Miller, you should find me there as well.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Mark, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.